Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9. And of course we're playing El Duce's War, Benito Mussolini's Italy. I'm continuing to watch the Spanish Civil War sort of unfold around us here. Spain, what do you want? Will you give them fuel for money? Yes. Because we want to help them more. I do want to stockpile fuel mostly. But we also want them to do well. And if they need fuel, we'll give it to them. It is interesting for me. I don't want to zip up. Just going that gets going a little too fast to react to. So trying to fill the quiet moments, and of course you are perfectly. I don't feel bad at all if you want to sort of skip ahead a little bit, but if you want to hear me yammer on, please do so. But it's interesting to me because yeah, I'm sort of at the big unknown here because I'm not used to, never played Italy like this. And so will we have events that will upgrade the infrastructure? Because Mussolini did do a bunch of infrastructure upgrades. Because this was sort of into the original colony of Eritrea, right around here. But they built some railways and whatnot. So I don't know, will there be events? So should I, spend the money and time now to upgrade? Ethiopia, I think there will be an event for the Via Balboa, which is the coastal highway, if you will. Not quite an Autobahn highway, dual carriageways, no stopping, no, nothing like that, but it was a proper paved road that you could drive reasonably quickly on. I'm not going to give you a speed, that was safe to drive on it, but good coastal road that really definitely helped out. So I presume that's going to happen. But okay, new industrial zone is ready. It will appear on the map in at least one IC province with your nation's core under your control without an existing strategic resource. Okay. Well, we'll get a strategic resource. Okay, good. Hopefully that will help us out. So it's just what is to come. So I'm, where with Germany, God, before I ever made my first series, I'd played Germany so many times. I had, in more than, well, obviously a big thing was, hey, watch the mod maker play, as I've sort of done, so you sort of know what the guy behind it thinks you should do. So that's knowing that. Now, of course, when you get new versions of GGA or whatever, there's nice new events to be surprised by, as well as there's stuff in Black Ice for Germany that's new and it's good and it's really refreshing to see. But I have a very good idea of what's there. Where here I just do not. I know sort of history, but I don't know how much has been done. Okay, infantry guns advance. Good. No, that's over here. Okay, we're going to stop that. Like I said before, Italy mostly used mountain artillery is an infantry gun type. Yes, that would be a good one. Just get some basic bombs. Researched. Yeah, good. They're doing sort of what I was suggesting, clearing up this back area. Because once you get this back area cleared up, there is a possible revolt risks, but they're not too great. Anti-tank weapons, which Italy, in an infantry sense, really sucked on. I'm pretty good with small arms. I don't think there's an Italian anti-tank rifle, which anti-tank rifles, and we can go on this a bit more later on, in the interwar era and early war era were quite effective. They weren't anti-tank guns, you know, one shot, one kill if you did it successful, because you know, you can penetrate the armor and do no damage, or you can penetrate the armor and kill the driver, but if you got enough people in there, you can swap it out or something. You know, they're not quite like a proper kill. And of course, they didn't have any Panzerfest, Panzerschrecks, bazookas, not even a Piat. Italy, so Italy just sucked on the infantry-based anti-tank capabilities. Now I know the bazookas slash Panzerfest came sort of late in the war for them to be developing, but those are real simple production capabilities to do that. Okay, we're still in 36, so we're getting sort of late. Ship crew berthing. Do small ship classes or not. Let's do ship berthing. That might get us where we need to go. And so yes, it's a voyage of exploration for me. And I know some of you have played Italy more recently than I have. Especially seeing as I haven't played it really before. And there is a difference between having it on and medium armor designs. Okay, so we need that. Small caliber tank gun. So we're waiting for that in 37 to go up more. Okay. I don't think we want to do tank destroyers just yet. Armor plate thickness, we could do that. Does anyone know what the pre-war, early war, before the bazooka, U.S. infantry anti-tank weapon was? Giving you a moment. You can Google it up, but giving you a moment to think about it. Okay. It wasn't an anti-tank rifle per se, because, and you might wonder why the Americans, and you can look at the American army as being, you know, after World War I, it was massively demobilized, and as time went on with the Depression and everything else, it was just gutted and hollowed out. And so you might just think, oh, they just didn't have the money or resources developed like the British with the Boys anti-tank rifle. The Germans with its, it went to used I think a longer round, but a 7.92 round with a steel core, but with a honking huge cartridge behind it. You know, I mean, just massively huge cartridge behind it. So it was instead of having a huge, like a 50 caliber mass behind it, like in the Boys anti-tank rifles, it was keeping it small, but with a steel core so it penetrates, but really ultra high velocity. Or the Soviets with their 14.5 millimeter, what is it? PTDRS something? I forget. Probably getting the initials wrong. Anti-tank rifle, which was actually pretty good. And there were a few other anti-tank rifles around. What the Americans didn't develop something like that. And there's a very good reason why the Americans didn't develop an anti-tank rifle. And part of the reason I think, like for the Germans with that really light cartridge, is that they were trying to keep the gun light, because to have a half-inch cartridge with a lot of pressure going out, you need a pretty heavy barrel on there. Where if they went down to their still had a lot of kick to it, but smaller cartridge, you don't need a super heavy barrel around it, keeps it lighter. So I think that's part of the reason why the Germans, because their T-Gewehr of World War One was actually a pretty big chunky round, you know, a round cartridge or bullet going out. I don't know exactly the millimeters right offhand, and it was a honking huge heavy thing and hard to move. Basically something like some of the other anti-tank rifles, but it's going to take a couple of men or 2 or 3 men to move around effectively, so it wasn't that mobile of a weapon. Well, yeah, the Americans never developed an anti-tank rifle because they had an anti-tank machine gun, the Browning 50 caliber. It was designed to be both an anti-tank and an anti sort of balloon gun. The reason I say balloon gun, because it could just say anti-aircraft, and it did, but it was the request to Browning to make the gun was to have a pretty big bullet, like when I forget one of the French things, so that you could put a lot of burning powder, if you will, a tracer round, but a lot of it in the back of it to be able to carry it up and keep it burning for a long time, because they wanted to be able to shoot it up at fairly high, long ranges and hit observation balloons that the Germans were using, at least early on, before the fighters were shooting them all down. That full of hydrogen, so you wanted to ignite it on fire. So you wanted a round big enough to transport a flaming and incendiary device. And they may have also been thinking about shooting down Zeppelins too, with that as well, for bigger and bigger aircraft that they figured were coming. So Browning came up with, first a water-cooled and then later the M2 heavy barrel. And so since the U.S. Army had an anti-tank machine gun, 50 caliber machine gun, that if you use a steel core penetrator in the standard sort of round setup, it'll punch through a lot of things, including some of the early, like Panzer IIIs and whatnot, the early ones. Not so well if it's just a lead with a copper jacket on it, but so they had this anti-tank machine gun, so they didn't need to have another anti-tank rifle. The machine gun for machine guns is, big heavy machine guns, is fairly light compared to like the Vickers, which was a water-cooled heavy machine gun, which was much heavier. But so okay, infantry support weapons, yay! So we come over here, cancel that, allows this to be done, so we prove that. So that is why reduce this down just a little bit, because we're at max. Not that we don't want to continue to expand our officer quarter, we do, but we want to do so carefully. Single engine airframe, and just grayed out, and road network, okay, 37, which we will also stop. It allows us to do railroad network. I think we want to do these things. I know we want this, the supply throughput and reinforcement. The real question, we still have even more. Okay, the real question is do we want to do this? Yeah, we don't want to, but we need to, I think. 1% IC supplies cover the cost of improving our roads. Okay, we have more technology. Okay, just a little bit more, but I don't think we're going to do assault gliders. The Italians did have, if we were playing with TRE, you'd see some events that would help develop jet fighters. Yeah, let's do this because we potentially have a lot of transports going around the Mediterranean. I say potentially because, of course, and let's add in 2 more, start production, but we're going to keep these guys down to there. As soon as we can, we want to, I mean, it's not an immediate priority, but we want to have a benefit, or we want to have a reserve for losses. Road network, good, which national unity, that's going to help. Okay, medicine has advanced. That is also nice. I believe that is under nation. Yeah, 1911. Yeah, we will continue that. I don't know if that's the best use of our limited. Well, it seems like we're getting more spies than we're using. We're also getting too many diplomats, so let's reduce this down. What we're going to do here is move it to oh no, I'm going the wrong way. Okay. 2 more spies. We would give them fuel from money. We don't need money. We just don't need money, and I would rather have a 9999999 a fuel when the war starts out, so we're not like going, we need fuel. Good, just 2 more provinces, then whatever's up here can shift to other fronts, though they've lost down here. Okay, well. Oh, another event or decision. Change ICs for resources. Not worth it. Small fuel tank research. Has happened to us to a level that will now allow us to not do that yet. Okay. 1937. What other technologies? Carrier prototype, which we're not going to do because we're not going to have any carriers. Close air support. Yeah. Drop tanks. What year is that? Probably, yeah, way too far to advance now. Okay, fairly good. New Vickers, non-cemented. Ship armor technology, okay. Build cost. Why does sea defense get worse? I've got to ask about that before I try. I'm actually surprised at how well, because I haven't really been looking at our naval technologies. They're fairly well advanced. That may be either because that's what a good look at the historical capabilities of Italy at the time. Very well could be that, or it could just be also a realization that the amount of leadership sucks, and seaplane tender, we don't need that. Tail, we don't need any submarines. Let's come down here. These are more fundamental, I think, to us. Let's research that. It'll take a while. Oh, well, good. We got some more blueprints from Britain. Well, Ducci, our spies have stolen plans to let us improve our abilities in range-finding equipment to level 3, giving them the following benefits. Great. Were we researching that? No, not currently, because we... Or, no, I think we had been. Okay, well, maybe not is... But I think we were just trying to get... Yeah, well, whatever. That helped. Not as much as I'd hoped, but it helped. Well, masterful breakthrough. Radio's advanced. Great. Delay between attacks is reduced, which is the big thing. With that, other things do most assuredly help. That is the big thing. Things like combat efficiency aren't a small thing either, of course, but okay, we're going to shift everything over to that for now. Just because we've got a lot. And I want to keep enough free spies. Continue stealing tech and protect ourselves. Okay, we have lost the effects of high popularity and we're now at medium popularity. We are having the spies board our ruling party, so that's good. Good, we've got a light cruiser now. I really don't know the Italian Navy well. Coastal battleships. Submarines. More submarines. Yeah, let's see about these guys here, which, well, they've got a lot of light crew. Well, I only got 3, so we'll. There we go. Andrea Doria. about Delio. And the Giuseppe Garibaldi, which will also stick here. I don't know that this is useful to have there. They help hunt subs most assuredly, but they're also slow. Luigi Pirandello has died. He was a fascist thinker, I believe, yes. Luigi Pirandello was an Italian dramatist, novelist, poet, and short story writer. He was awarded the 1934 Nobel Prize for Literature for his bold and brilliant renovation of the drama and the stage. Pirandello's works included novels, hundreds of short stories, about 40 plays, some of which were written in Sicilian. Pirandello's tragic farces were often seen as forerunners of the theater of the absurd, as he was a committed fascist. In 1923, he had a personal meeting with Mussolini at the Palazzo Chigi. In 1924, he sent a message to Mussolini where he asked to join the PNF. That's the fascist party, if you don't know. What is it? Popular National Front or something like that. I forget exactly. He often publicized, he often publicly criticized democracy, while he lauded Mussolini in his work as a Duce of Italy. Now, I want to be very careful how I say this, and this isn't regarding him because I don't know enough about him. I know of him, I don't know him well at all. So this is not him, but it's sort of publicly criticizing democracy. It started maybe a little before World War II, but in America, definitely in World War II, democracy becomes this, I don't know if Holy Grail or this unquestioned value that is unquestionably good or unquestionably the best. Okay? And, you know, majority rules, democracy prevails, democracy is the best. And, if we look at the history of mankind, now, I know that there are a lot of political thinkers and other groups that don't want to look at the history of mankind because it doesn't support the premises that that they are advocating. Meaning they want to live in some ideal world or something, or mankind's going to evolve into it. But the history of mankind shows us clearly that the majority don't always make the best or the most rational or the best long term, might be a good way of saying it, decisions. And they are often ruled by passions. They are often work on knee-jerk reactions. A lot of people have reflexively come to support Trump, even though when Obama was doing the same thing or advocating the same type of thing, they were against it because it was Obama. But now that it's Trump, they're for it, for basically the same premises or policies. And also, I will say this, that there are people reflexively against something just if they think Trump supports it. You can look at some interviews of university students. And university students are great for interview purposes because they're students at universities, which are presumed to be, one, some of our most intelligent people. 2 are some of our most highly educated people. And 3, some of the people that are currently actively being educated, and not like, oh, hey, yeah, I was educated 40 years ago and, you know, in a university, but I've just, I don't know, become an engineer designing things and just sort of tuned the rest of the world out. Live my daily life with my family, but I'm, you know, just tune the rest of the, you know, the politicals going on. And now I study and keep up with engineering, but I build bridges or something, and that's all I'm concerned with. And you know, so you know, you might forgive somebody like that who doesn't keep up on all the stuff. So when you interview university students, you're presuming that they're intelligent, that they're reasonably well educated. Not they're not the professors; they're just the students, but you know, they should know the basics. And where if you go to high school students, well, you could randomly pick the guys that are almost ready to drop out, where presumably, if you've made it into university, you might be ready to drop out of university because you can't cut it, but you should have been at least doing well in high school or whatever. And again, like as I say, that they should be reasonably up on things. And you go in and say, you know, Trump supports XYZ in front of them. What do you think? Oh, that's terrible. Or, you know, or this Trump policy. Oh, that's terrible. And then you hit them with, well, really, that's Bernie Sanders. Oh, really? And so that they just were supporting the policy, whatever the policy on is, whether if Bernie Sanders advocates it, they were for it. And if Trump advocates it, they were against it. And as opposed to saying, well, on that one, Trump, you know, they could come out and say, oh, Trump's a monster, if that's what they believe, fine. But this one thing, whatever the interviewer is bringing up, this one thing, well, I agree with Trump on this one thing, but he's still a monster. Okay, you know, I can, you know, respect, you know, again, Trump, I don't think is a monster. He isn't Hitler. He isn't Mussolini. He might want to be a bit more dictatorial, but he doesn't really want to, you know, create a new Roman Empire, no matter what you may want to think. He is a, you know, he's no Stalin, so he's no monster, but you may not like him and like his policies. That's fine. I'm not an advocate for Trump, as you know. But people who presumably should know things are picking whether they like it or not, whether it's their side, their team, their whatever. So we see this in the human being, and I sort of study the human being from in mass groups as opposed to individuals. Individual, you know, sort of psychology with psychiatry and all of that kind of stuff is because as individuals they work different as they work as if they're different in groups as they are in individuals. Meaning an individual can have all of his own weird psychoses, but those are not necessarily affecting his group behavior. And group behavior and dynamics works, one, as you're in a group, a large crowd at a rock concert, whatever, or as, like we say, a team sport, even when you're away from the concert, the football game, the whatever, you still sort of have this sort of group dynamic, even though you're temporarily, you know, a day, a week, whatever, a few hours in isolation, you still have these sort of team sport elements in your group psychology. And so I look at this and I see the human being. Now, I am a big fan. I'm not entirely convinced they're right, but I'm a big fan of the American Founding Fathers. And of course, there are multiple opinions, so you could pull up some. You know, you got Thomas Paine, who thought at first the French Revolution was a good thing. He almost gets killed by the revolution and determines later that it was a very, very bad thing. It just had high ideals in which he agreed with, including the sort of leveling element. We could get into leveling some other time. But, you know, so you can find different viewpoints to support your own particular thing, the Founding Fathers. But what was most of the Founding Fathers, a great majority of them, realized that democracy was not, in and of itself, was a good thing. In fact, a lot of the political scientists, if you will, that they, this is before, as somebody pointed out recently, and I'm going to point this out more and more often, whenever it has science in the description, it's not a science. Political science is not a science. Social science is not a science. So I have a degree in political science, and I would say this when I was getting the degree, that is not a science. But this was somebody pointed out, and I forget exactly who, that I saw this on television. But whenever you have science in the title, it is not a science, because you don't have physics science or math science or a biology science or you know, any of those other things. You don't have, if you have science, you don't have science in them. If they're a real science, you don't have the word science in it. If you have weather science, there is no science of weather. We're studying the weather in a scientific method, but there is no science of the weather. We don't still understand and have it down. So climate science then must not be a thing, because it has science in the term. Physics, you don't say physics science. You don't say chemistry science. You just say chemistry. Just say biology. So whenever you put science in the term, it ain't a science. So all your climate scientists out there, well, climate scientists, well, that's climatologists. I don't know. But you can say, well, you don't say physics scientists. You just say physicists. You're weatherologists. But they may not be a science. So just a good hint there. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're trying to elevate their field of study to be on par with a science, but it is not a science. So, because you don't say historical science, you just say history. And it isn't a science, it's just the study of the past. Actually, it's the study of the written word, though we expand it now to be videos and audio and other things. So we see democracy and the people, and I would say a very good view of this is Hitler and Goebbels' use of the democratic method to convince a people of National Socialism as a good thing, and to give up their democratic rights as a democratic process. So democracy, because we can see what happens in Germany with a democracy, and the Weimar Republic, and again, I don't know the details, the structure of the Weimar Republic. I know it fairly well, but not in great details, but basically was fundamentally set up to be very democratic, as opposed to coming out of the rather authoritarian Kaiserreich that did have voting. But democracy, and again back to the American Founding Fathers, they knew democracy as a thing was not a good thing, and their political thinkers that they often looked at were Socrates, who didn't write, but he talked, and Plato recorded him, sometimes I believe accurately, and Plato and Socrates, not Socrates, Aristotle, sorry, man, who is my favorite of the three. And all three of those gentlemen of Greece hated democracy. They hated democracy with a passion. Now, the American Founding Fathers did not hate democracy with a passion, but they knew, because that term passion is in there, that democracy was a bad and dangerous thing. Now, that doesn't mean that they didn't want voting. That doesn't mean they didn't want representative government, but they didn't want direct democracy. What they wanted was, and this is what does come out of particularly Plato and Aristotle, was constitutional government, was rules of the road that limited government power, that also limited the people's voice to a, to keep it from overreacting or swinging rapidly, to limit it, to be changeable and malleable, but you had to have massive consensus to change the rules. This is one, it's not a majority, but it's massive consensus to change the fundamental rules of the Constitution. See, Britain, they keep saying they have a constitution. They have a written constitution. Well, they have a collection of laws that make up their constitution, and more or less, you can go and look at all the laws. The laws aren't, again, I say more or less. Some things are obscure in, Edwardian, or not Edwardian, that's too soon, back in sort of Norman law codes or something that someone might be able to pull out of their butt to look at some parliamentary thing that was passed, or some Elizabethan law that still may be theoretically on the books, that's just in some rolled up bill passed way back whenever, and it's not really published and is not practical to get at. And we can talk about the version of the deep state that Britain may have, or something like this. But generally speaking, you can go and see all the laws, so you know when you're breaking the laws, and they're not just changed on the whim of a dictator. So you know, they do have that. But basically, if you know, a law passes their parliament, it's now in the Constitution. It didn't go through a process greater than a normal law to change the Constitution. So it's constantly shifting and changing Constitution, literally every time Parliament passes a new law. Where the U.S., to change the Constitution, there are several constitutional processes. And so, more or less, the legislature, meaning the Senate and the House of Representatives and the President, if they all agree, they can't change the Constitution. They have to get it ratified by the states or do a constitutional convention and other sorts of things. So, but even if, like tomorrow or next election, Trump gets control of the House of Representatives and the Senate, you know, enough, you know, big enough thing, and he's still president, and all these people agree that we're going to make Trump president for life. That doesn't change the Constitution. That has to then be ratified by a majority of the states before they can pass that law. So there's a process that it has to go through to change the basic things, to limit the extent of the democracy. I hope you notice that I'm not saying that voting and representation in and of itself is a bad thing, but democracy, the majority rules, because we can see majority tyrannies. That's where you get into, because they talk about rights, and often minority rights, though they normally mean skin color rights. Notice when they talk about minority rights, they don't ever talk about gender minority rights, because, well, unless they're some obscure so-called gender, because generally speaking in America, women make up the majority, so men are in the minority. So they're normally talking about skin color minorities, but other minorities, whether it's could be ethnic minorities, which could be like, oh, I don't know, the Louisiana Cajuns or somebody like that. Could be, but they don't have a different skin color. They're the white skin color, so they don't count as a proper ethnic minority that needs protecting. And there are other minority cultures within America, like the Mormons, like the Amish, you know, the Quakers. There are minority cultures that are white and are European based, but that the minority rights people don't seem to ever want to acknowledge as being a minority culture and group. So the idea that minorities, and could be simply the minority as in the side that loses the vote, has rights. And again, I hope you're also understanding that my criticism here of democracy is in no way endorsing this guy, Luigi, and presumably because he lauded Mussolini and the idea of an El Duce or a duke or leader of Italy as being a supporter of dictatorships. And see, this is where, again, like I say, I'm not criticizing his work as on any specificity because I don't know it. I just know of him. Is that to criticize democracy like I have been doing does not necessarily mean the mirror opposite, the complete lack of democracy, and there's different forms of that, is the way to go either. It sort of, to me, goes into the Aristotelian viewpoint of a balanced constitution in which you have things like voting and democratic elements in it, along with representative elements, which may be there because of a democratic vote, or just maybe there because of history and tradition and other things. So often, again, criticizing democracy can be and is a very legitimate thing, but it does not then follow. And this is where groups like Antifa, which is sort of the modern popular name for the group, but is where if you're against fascists, you must be a socialist or a communist or radical anarchist, and any sort of authoritarian or any sort of authority, or like the police, that's what I mean, that term, or any sort of traditionalism, which may be undemocratic, like in America we have the Supreme Court or some such thing like that, or other sorts of in different cultures, that then if you're for those, you must be for fascism, as in there is fascism and non-fascism, and they're the ones who determine what is fascism, and all that is fascism is evil, and all that is against fascism is good, and maybe just greater or lesser degrees of good. But this is where these sort of extremists have their fallacy, and a lot of people who will either personally affected by the world, lose their job because, hey, they used to make wagons, or they shoot horses, but there's no longer that many horses to be shoot. Of course, we're always going to have racing horses and fun hobby horses, and in a few cases actually you're running cattle. In some places horses are good, though often now they normally use different motorcycles and quad bikes to get around on ranches. But in some places horses still may be useful, but they're not going to be any as an actual work productivity element, as opposed to just a fun and enjoyment element. Horses go away, and that's mostly good, because we don't want a bunch of horse shit on the streets. And so, yeah, they're going to lose their job, and we need them to lose their horseshoeing job, because we can't just keep employing them to make horseshoes that we no longer have horses for. So the world changes. I'm using sort of an extremist example because I don't want to step on any person's modern toes. But that maybe their job should go away, and it's sort of hard to say something, your job should go away. Well, but I need it to eat. Yes, we understand that, but we need to, as societies, and this is one thing that fascism very much tried to do, was move people away from being horseshoers to being people that working in factories. That was their answer to some of the problem. So, but society needs to find a way. Can be done through free markets and capitalism, but needs to find a way to shift people's working habits and elements from one type of economy to the new economy, whatever the new economy is happening, because we're having, with the new information, there's new economies coming. Taxi drivers may become an endangered driving species, partially because of Uber, but also maybe because self-driving cars are out there, so you don't need taxi drivers, but you may need more mechanics, or I don't know, something like that to support them, or more people that drive around in trucks to rescue broken down taxis that get flat tires or something like that more immediately. And so changing economies, because things are going to change, and so people will find the criticisms either of capitalism, as I've explained before. Often capitalism is criticized for, or private ownership of capital in economies that aren't capitalism, that are bad, mercantilism, are often blamed as being capitalism, as for the sins of capitalism, when they're not even a capitalist economy. So some of the negative elements there. Italy was very much not a capitalist society before the fascists came in. They were sort of mercantilists and not quite the serf economy of sort of medieval, trying to I'm blanking on the word I'm looking for. Maybe one of you want to supply it below. But was sort of landowners with the tenants on their farm kind of based economies. There was an agrarian economy that was often work related as opposed to money related type economies, and that's what Italy was shifting out of with the industrialization and capitalism, especially in a very rapid situation, like I said before, can be very cruel to people in that. So a safety net is needed, and Mussolini at first saw that as socialism, and then moved it and developed fascism as the safety net. So people will often see a problem and hear the criticisms, whether it's of the capitalist economy or of democracy, and then jump, valid criticisms, and jump to the opposite things. And that is where we get into danger of the situation. So fascism, in my opinion, fascism as an end goal is a bad or not the best solution at best. As a temporary solution, meaning to get through a transition period, I've thought, and fascism has lots of bad negative elements to it too. So this is no endorsement of fascism, but it's sort of like, maybe a little better than, sort of, and I'm going to say hardcore socialism as opposed to different than communism. I'm not talking about socialism real light that has, socialized medicine and money for people that are out of work. I'm not talking like that. I'm talking socialism that has nationalized industry. Like in Britain during the socialist era, the government took over car manufacturing companies. The government owned car manufacturing companies. That's socialism. That's bad. The government owning means of production. Now, it's one thing for the government to own an arms factory or a munitions factory. Arms make guns, munitions make bullets. The U.S. government still owns some munitions factories. I don't know if it owns any arms factories, but there's still a government, at least one government factory that makes bullets for the U.S. Army. That's sort of national security reasons. That factory, to my knowledge, does not sell bullets, at least to individuals. Well, they might sell them theoretically as surplus after it goes into the Army. Yeah, they do surplus out bullets at some point. But it's not a direct seller, or it's not a direct competitor to the public market. So, for that. But, so, I'm not talking about the idea of publicly supported medicine or publicly supporting poor people socialism. I'm talking about the socialism of government owning the means of production, sort of that stuff. And and it's one thing to, if something sort of goes bankrupt, is collapsing, maybe the national car company of your country, so the government takes it over to try to, instead of just having it entirely go away, get shut down, to then try to work with some people to shift it over to get it back into private hands at some point. That's that's sort of an intermediate government being, instead of ideological, being practical. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the idea, this factory is going to, from now on, for the future, is going to be owned by the government. That, I think, is worse than basic fascist economic policies. And that's which are different than fascist governmental policies of, and again, I hope you don't, I know most of you watch me know this, I'm not advocating fascist black shirts walking around the street and, I don't know, harassing women who are showing too much skin, because that sort of happens, or other sorts of, social behavior modification on the streets by fascist black shirts. I am entirely against that. That the idea that, do that as some sort of semi-governmental, semi-political force. So I'm not in any way advocating that. I'm talking more about the fascist principles of economics are better than the sort of hardcore socialist policies for dealing with the transition periods, not an end result, not the end state, not the where Mussolini wanted that as the goal in the end state. I'm talking about it as a transition state to get through rough times. Okay. He's died. We're going to end the episode here talking about fascism and democracy and criticisms. I hope you're all interested in this. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking the videos if you would. I really do appreciate it. It helps the channel out. Subscribing, that should help you out and the channel out. And telling a friend, hey, you know, there's a share button. If you got a Twitter account, go down and just hit share this on Twitter and go, hey, I watched this video today. Even if you have no followers on Twitter, it still helps because the Google algorithm sees, oh, this person thought it was good enough to share. Or you could share it on your Google Plus account. You know, that Google version thingy that no one really pays attention to. The algorithm will see that, or share it on your Facebook thing or something like that. Just share it somewhere. The algorithm will see that and will promote up my videos once they see that. So I really appreciate if any of you could do that. And of course, I love hearing from you both for the algorithm. More comments, the better. Even if just, I like the video today. That helps out the algorithm. But also, I really do like hearing from you and discussing things. And of course, as part of this, since it's still early days and some of you have mentioned topics that you want to talk about or want me to talk about, and I definitely will be talking about them, but I'm going to sort of some of the strategies, things, going to sort of save a little bit more of that hopefully for the war that we'll hopefully get to. So though we're almost out of 36, so we're going fairly quick. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for liking the videos, like I say, and see you next time for more Hearts of Iron.